In today's lesson, we are learning about creating and configuring object in Aptos framework. Actually, we are continuing from our previous lesson. In our previous lesson, I explained what objects are and everything about objects. So if you have not watched that video, do well to go back and watch the video. The link to the video will be in the description below. So take our time and watch the video so that you have a perfect understanding of what we are going to be talking about in this very video. Creating an object involves two steps. One, creating the object call resource group, which has an address you can use to refer to the object later. Then secondly, customizing how the object will behave using permission called ref. When it comes to creating an object in Aptos, there are three types of object you can create. There are three types of object you can create. One, the normal objects. Then the second one is the name object. And the third one is the sticky object. Now let's look at them one after the other. The normal object. The normal object is this type of object is deletable and has a random address. It can be deleted. After creating it, it can be deleted. So this is how it is created. If you look at this, this is a function. From the beginning of the code, this is the name of the model under this address. Then we imported the signer from the standard library, and we imported the object from Aptos framework using this use keyword. Then this is the function. We declared a function, and the name of the function is create normal object. Then the function is accepting a single parameter, and the parameter is accepting is an address. Then if you notice, we use the signer object which we imported to derive a signing ability from the address that we receive from the parameter. So that's, and we stored inside the variable called caller address. Then in the next line, we created the object using the caller address. So we said object create object. Then we passed the caller address as an argument to create the object. Because if we're creating an object, we need either one or two arguments. But for the creating normal object, we need just one argument. The person that is calling the function. This is the person's address that we passed to it, and it returned a constructor ref. And this constructor ref is what we use in configuring the objects. But this is how a normal object is created in Aptos framework. If you notice, this is the object, and this part is create object, meaning this object that we are creating now can be deleted. So it is not permanent, it can be deleted. This is the first type of object in Aptos framework. Now let's move to the next type. In the second type of objects that can be created, the second type of object that can be created is called named object. A named object, this is a type that is not deletable and has a deterministic address. That means it can be the address of the object can be determined from creation, and this is the way it is created. So it uses seed because it having a deterministic address. So we need seed to create the address. So this is the second function we are using to create, and we name this function create name object. Now the same way we retrieve the signer ability from the address with the signer tools that we imported from the standard library, we stored the address, the ability within this variable called caller address. Then in the next line, we created the object. And this time around, instead of using create object, which is for the normal creation of objects, we use create named object, and we pass two arguments to it: the caller and the caller address and the seed that we coded in this very part. Look at the seed, constant name. Then a vector. We said this is invite. So, and we passed the seed. So this time is this this object has an address that we can retrieve in a known address because we use the caller address and the seed to create the object address. So that's the second type of object that can be created in Aptos framework. Then the third type of object that we can create in Aptos framework is called sticky object. This type of object is not deletable and has a random address. Unlike the name object that is deterministic, I mean, it's the creation of the address is where is known from the beginning. But for the sticky object, the address is random. So when it is created, it gives a random address. No, you cannot determine the address from the beginning. So you can only get the address when you need it. But the name object you can create as when creating the object, you create you give the seed for the object to create the address. But with this sticky object, the address is random. It cannot be deleted, just like the name address is not deletable. The sticky object is not deletable. So now, with this, look at the function. In this function, we are creating the sticky object. We first of all call the keyword func, then the name of the function, then also we passed in a parameter, then we use the signer to derive this signing ability for the address. Then we created the object in this particular line. We said create sticky object. So if I want to create a normal object, I will just use the word create. I will just say create normal object. I'll use the word create. I'll just say create object for creating normal object. But if I want to create a name object, I will say create named object. Then pass in my two parameter, which is the color, address, and the seed. Remember, the name object cannot be deleted once created. Then the same thing goes for this sticky object. It cannot be deleted, but the address is created randomly, unlike the named object. So these are the three types of objects, and these are the ways they are created in Aptos framework. Next part, we'll be learning about the configuration, how to configure the object that we have created. Remember, we said objects are like bus that, that group resources together. So let's think of an object like a box. After creation, you can add resources together, or you can add items to them. And one unique feature about object in Aptos framework is that they have address on the blockchain, so you can easily access them with their address. So now we are going to be looking at how to configure an object in Aptos framework in this part of the lesson. So now we have created the object before, like we did, and we are to want to add resources to them. So that's what we are dealing with in this very part of the video. So we are adding resources to them. So let's begin again. We called this function. This function we called it create my object, and we are using the function is accepting a parameter which is an address from the address of the caller that is calling the function. Then we are retrieving the signing ability with the signer tools. Then we pass in the caller address into this signer to get the signing ability, and we stored it in this variable called caller address, which I explained earlier on. Now we moved on to creating an object in this very particular line of the code base. We said object create objects, and we passed in the caller address, the signer ability that we talked about before. Now, after creating the object, it returned this constructor ref. See, now this constructor ref is like the object itself, like the box which we have just created. Now which is similar to an account. Now that we have the box, we want to create the ability for the box to sign its own transaction, to sign its own transaction for receiving resource or transferring resource. So now we pass the ref into this method or object to generate a signer for it, or generate an authority for it, and store it inside this variable called object signer. So now the object is an entity on the blockchain, so it has its own ability now um to sign transaction, to sign some transaction related to it. So in this other line, now we are moving the resources, which is this my struct resource, into the object. So we are using this authority that it has to sign the transaction and to move it into the object. So that's what happened here. So that's how the resources are added to the object. So after creating the object, we also generated a signing ability for the object. So that which is stored in this variable. So when we want to transfer the when we want to transfer or move a resource into the object, we're going to do that using the signer ability of the object. So the object, the authority is going to authorize the moving in of the resources into the object itself. So that's what happened in that.
This time around, we are going to be adding extensibility to the object. In the first part, just with the other part, we added resources to the object. Now we are adding extensibility to the object. Now, why is that needed? Sometimes you want an object to be editable later on. So, in order for us to edit the object later on, we we have to generate a signing ability for that. Over Now let's go over the code and let's see how we can add extensibility. That means extend ref to the object. So we are going over the code, go over the code from the beginning line by line. So we start with the, like we know this is the address, this is the name of the contract or the module, which is object playground. Under this address called my address, then we are importing the signer from the standard library. Then we are importing a string, the string itself and the string type. Then we're also importing Aptos framework objects, the Aptos framework object itself and the Aptos framework object types. So in this line of code, this constant define the error that will be thrown. The first one is error when the caller that calls the function is not the owner of the object. This error will be thrown. For the second constant, is when the caller that calls the function is not the publisher of the smart contract. The second is not publisher error will be thrown. So now let's move on. Now we are having three resources, three struct, which are also called resource in Aptus framework. So we are having these three resources. We are having the first resources is called my struct. The second resource is called my message. Is called message. Then the third one is called object controller. This first one is the one that will be added to the object, that will be moved to the object from the beginning when it is created. In a later function, we will add this resource to the object, meaning that's what we are going to be doing. We add this message to the object. Right? That means at that time, that means you have to extend the object. So this third struct, which is resource, is used for storing the extend ref. It's used for storing the extend ref. Now let's move on to the function. Now in this first function, we are creating the object. We are creating the object, and this keyword entries means that this function is a kind of function that users can interact with can be from the front end. So when a function is named entry in Aptos framework, it means that users can interact with it from outside the contract. This word phone is to declare that we are creating a function, then followed by the name of the function, create my object. So we are um, receiving or accepting a an argument which is called referring to a signer. So in this first line, we are retrieving the address of the caller, the person calling the function. We are retrieving the person's address using this signer tools to retrieve the person's address, and we stored it inside this variable called caller address. So we created the next line. We created the object associated, and we associated the object to the person's address. So this object is created here and is associated with the person's address. So and it returns a constructor ref. Constructor ref is like making reference to the object. So the object is being returned. And in the next line, we are generating a signer for the object. So remember, it's like a box. So the object has been created in this first line. Then in this one, we are generating a signer. It's like generating a key or a access control for the object. So if we want to interact with that object, we need this access control. We need this key. This object signer will serve as the key to interact with the object. So we generated the signer, and it returns this, or it is stored within this variable called object signer. Then we moved the resource. Remember my struct that we declared before. We moved the resource and initialized the value that was there. So we move the resource into the object. So that's what happened in this line of code. We move the resource into the object using the access control, the key. So with the access control, we can interact with the object. So after moving the first resource into the object, in the next line, we are creating a or we are generating extend ref. Extend ref is like this access card that will enable us to add more resources. So without having the extend ref, we cannot add more resources to the object. Remember, we have already added one resource to the object. Now, the next line, we have to generate this extend ref in order for us to later on add more resource to the object. So we are generating extend ref, and after generating the extend ref, we moved we stored the extend ref within the struct within this struct called object controller, and stored it within the function within the and stored it within the object. So that's what happened in this function. Now in this next function called add message, we're going to be adding a new resource to the object that we have created. So these are the arguments that we will be accepting. These are the arguments, and we are accepting these parameters. Then the first one, we are retrieving or extracting the caller's address with these signer tools. We are extracting the caller's address using the signer tools. Then after that, we will check this. We will check if we will check with this assert to ensure that the person calling the function is the owner of the object. So the person calling the object, that's what this assert um, method is handling here, is checking the person calling the function, is it the owner of the object. If it is not the owner of the object, it will throw an error, not owner. The next one, we are having another check, and we are checking using this assert tools to check the person calling the function, is it the publisher of the smart contract. If the person calling the function is not the publisher of the smart contract, it throws an error saying not publisher. Then we are retrieving the address of the object with this method, object object address. We are retrieving, then we are passing in the object which will pass as argument into the method, and we are retrieving the address of the object. Remember, I told you the address has an object has address in on the blockchain, so we are retrieving the address in this line of the code. After retrieving the address, we access the resource, object controller resource that we stored within the object, and we are using the object address to get to access the object on chain, and retrieving the object resources where we stored our extend ref. That's why we added .extend ref to access to get the extend ref from the resource within the object. Then after retrieving the extend ref, the next thing, we are use the extend ref, which is like a access card, to generate a signing key, a signer key for to generate to generate a signing key for so that we can add more resource. So that's what we did here. We use the extend ref after retrieving the extend ref, the access card, like we called it, and we use this method to and pass in the extend ref to generate a signing key for it to enable us add more resource to the object. After generating the signing key, we moved the new resource into the object using this new signing key that we generated from the extend ref. So this is how we can extend an object in Aptos framework. So adding extensibility, it is through this process that we can add extensibility to. In the next section, we'll be dealing with disabling and toggling of transfer in an object. By default, all objects are transferable, but it can be changed if we want to ensure the object is not transferable. So there are ways we can um, disable the ability for the objects to be transferred. So we'll look at it in the next section of the video. This, after creating an object, by default, the object can be transferred from one user to the other, from one person to the other. So when an object is created, like I said, it can be transferred by default. So, but in this lesson, we are going to learn how we can disable that functionality from the object, so that we or toggle it off or toggle it on. So now let's look at the example on how we can achieve that. So we are importing the standard library, the standard from the standard library. We are importing the object, and we are this define the error in the that we'll be using in the smart contract. This is the access card that will store the transfers that will enable us to either um, enable the transfer or disable the transfer. So now let's write the function. So in this function, we just declared the function signature, and in this function, declare the name of the function, accepting three. We're having three parameters: the caller, the person that will be calling the function, the address of the caller, and we'll be accepting two boolean. One, this transferable will be indicating if the um, object can be transferred. If it is yes, then we'll see what will be done next. Then same thing with this controller. So now we are retrieving the caller address using this signer tools to retrieve the caller address. We created the object here. We are creating the object here, and it's stored within the constructor ref. Then we generated a signer for the object by passing the constructor of the object into the generate signer tools to generate a signing key for the object. Now we are generating the transfer ref. Like I said, the transfer ref is like the access card that enables us to toggle the transfer ability on or toggle it off. So if it is we toggle it on, it means the object can be transferred. But if it is toggled off, it means the object cannot be transferred. So we are using this generate transfer ref to generate an access card that will enable us to do that. So when I mean access card, it's just like saying the access control. Easy understanding. That's why I'm using the word access card, but we are generating transfer ref. Then after generating the transfer ref, we check if the transfer variable which was passed from in this our perimeters, if the transfer variable is false, that means we are saying if the transfer variable being passed is false, we are disabling the ability for to be able to transfer the object. That's what is happening here. So if the transferable is false, not true, the object is being disabled. That means we're not allowing it to be transferred. If the controller is true, we are moving the transfer ref into this object controller resource, and we are storing it within the objects. So if the controller is true, we are initializing the variable within this resource Then we are moving it into the objects. Now in this function, we want to toggle the transfer on or off. So we are passing in the object and we are passing in the caller or the signer address. Then retrieve the we retrieve the caller address for using the signer tools. Then after that we are checking. That's what this assert is doing here. We are checking if the person calling the function is the same with the person that published the smart contract. If the person is not the same, if it's not the same person, it will throw an error, not publisher. So after retrieving the caller's address, we use the caller's address to check if the address is the same with the one that published the smart contract. If it is not the same, the function stops here and throw an error. But if it is the same, it continues. Now, if it is the same, it continues. Then we checked for the address of the object. We check for the address of the object and retrieve the address of the object and store it within this object address. We use the object address to access to access the we are accessing the object controller resource within the object where we store the transfer ref. So we are accessing the object controller resource. Remember, we store the transfer ref inside the object controller resource, which we stored. And remember, we store this resource within the object. So with the help of this address, we're able to locate the object and also locate the resource, object controller resource within the object, and also get the transfer ref from the resource within the object. After retrieving the transfer ref, we said is if the object transfer is allowed. If the object is allowed to transfer, we toggled it off. We disable it, toggled it off. If S, that means it's not allowed to transfer, we toggle it on. We enable it. So we enable it and we disable the transfer. So in this if block, we are saying if it is allowed, transfer is allowed, we said disable the transfer. If it is not allowed, we'll enable it. So this is how we can toggle off and toggle on the transferability of an object. Video helpful and you've gained a lot of knowledge from this video. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the like button so that the video can reach more persons that will benefit from it. In this section, we'll be learning how to delete an object that is created with the default method. So, like we earlier said, that we have three ways of creating object in Move programming language in Aptos framework. So we said the first one is a default method, which is normal method. The second one is the name method, and the third one is the sticky method. So, like we said before, the name and the sticky method, once created, can never be deleted. But with the default method, it can be deleted. So we are looking at how to delete the default method object being created. So now we are going to be using two functions. Yeah, we are going to be the first function is going to be creating an object, while the second function is going to be deleting the object. So now let's start with the first function. So we are creating the object in this function. So we declare the function, and when the name of the function is to create my object, then we are passing in a single parameter, the caller, um, the signer. So we are passing the signer so we can get the caller's address from it. Then, firstly, we retrieve the caller's address using this method, signer address of, using this method to retrieve the caller's address. Then it was stored within this variable called caller address. After retrieving the caller's address, we are creating the function. Remember, this method of creation is a default method, so we are not creating the name object, neither are we creating the sticky object. We are creating the default object, and which means can be deleted. So we pass in the caller's address as an argument into the method, meaning the object that we are creating is associated with this with the caller, with the caller's address. The object which we are creating now we just associate with the caller's address. Then it return the constructor ref. I've explained this in the previous sections, so let's quickly move on. Then we generate the signer using the construction ref that we got after creating the object. So we remember after creating the object, it returned construction ref, and we are passing in the construction ref into this generate signer method in order to generate a signing ability, or generate a signing key that will grant or allow the permission to interact with the object. So with this signer object, we are allowed to interact with the object, like like moving resources into the object. But in this very example, we are not going to be moving resources into the object. We are just going to move straight to generating a delete ref for the object. In the previous examples, I showed you how to move resources into the object, so we'll just keep that part for now. The next is that will be generating the delete ref. Now in this part we are generating the delete ref. And the delete ref is like the access card that will grant us the permission to delete the object later on in the other function which we will be creating. So we pass in the constructor ref as an argument to generate a delete ref for this object which the constructor ref is representing. So we are generating a delete ref. The delete ref is like the access card or the access control to grant the permission for deleting the object later in the smart contract. So it returns this delete ref, and the next thing we are doing here, we are moving the delete ref, the access card which we have already generated. We are moving it into a resource. This is the resource we created, if you remember, and I said it's going to be holding a delete ref, and the type is object delete ref. So we are moving it into this object controller, which is a resource, and we are storing it within the resource within the object. So what we did here was that we the delete ref which we've generated, we stored it within this object controller resource. Then we moved it to the object itself. So that's what happened here. So that's the end of this function. So in all, what we did in this function, we retrieve the caller's address, we use it to create or generate or create an object for create a new object, then it return this construction ref, then we use the construction ref to generate a a signer, and what this signer grants us the permission to interact with the object. So it's like the another object can is similar to that the what an account does. So it's like it has the signing ability to with this signer we have the ability to interact with the um object. Then we also generated the delete ref and passed in the delete ref into the object controller resource, then stored it within the um, object. You can see that we are passing in this object signer because this object signer is giving us the permission to move any resource into the object that we have created. So we are storing this delete ref within the object because we will have to extract it later on and use it to delete the object when the need arises. So we are done with this first function, which we used. The function was to create the object. Then we are moving on to the second function, which is to delete the object. So we are calling the function delete, then passing in the signer, then also the object that we want to delete. We're passing in the object. Then the first thing we have to do is to retrieve the caller address with the signer tools. Then after retrieving this signer address, the next thing we want to do, we want to check if the person that is interacting with the function is the owner of the object. The person interacting with the function, we are checking if the person is the owner of the object. If the person is not the owner of the object, it is not permitted to delete the object. So that's what this assert method is handling here, is ensuring that the owner of the object is the one that has the permission to delete the object. If the person is not the owner, it shows an error saying not owner. So the next turn is if the person interacting with the function is the owner, it moves on to the next part. The next thing we have to do is to assess the retrieving. We are fetching the object address using the object address method to fetch the object address because the object is stored within the blockchain. So we are fetching the address of the object in order to interact with the object because the object is already stored. So we are fetching the address and storing it within this object address. After fetching the object address, we are to retrieve, we are to extract, not fetch. We are not fetching this time around. We are to extract the delete ref from the object controller resource that is within the object. So we are moving out, we are not moving in this time around. We are moving out the object, the delete ref from the object. So because when we are destroying the object, alongside we are destroying the delete ref with it. So that's why we are not just fetching the object, we are extracting it, removing it completely from the object. Then that's what will happen. That's what happened in this very part. Then we call the delete method within the object. So we call the delete method within the object and passed in the delete ref as the argument. So what happens here is that the object is being completely removed or destroyed and alongside with the delete ref. So that's how an object is being deleted and from the blockchain in Aptos framework. So in our next video, we'll be building a smart contract so we can apply what we have learned so far about object in that video. It will help us with the application part of the object in a real world project. So see you in the next video where we'll be having our tutorials on how to apply what we have learned so far about object creation and configuration. Thank you for watching.